Hi friends, and welcome to another amazing video provided to you by the Homer City Community Garden and Learning Center. Today we're going to be talking about fermentation and how to make some really interesting mocktails. First up, we're going to talk about how to make homemade vinegar. Now you can make homemade vinegar out of a lot of different things, but today we're going to be making apple cider vinegar, and we're going to be certain that we make it in a way that makes it the most tasty. So we're going to be avoiding a few things when we make this, and you'll see that. So to start, we're going to need some apples. We're going to need a way to cut up those apples, and we're going to need some sugar and some filtered or spring water. Here is a jar where I've put some peels from an apple I cut earlier in the week. You can just save those as you make them, or if you have some old apples that you're ready to get rid of, those make great cider as well. If you notice, I'm cutting some of the yuckier spots, I guess you would call it, the core parts off. I'm trying to avoid the stems and also the seeds, because that will lend a little bit of a bitter flavor to it. So you can either chop it up, or if you're preparing snacks for the day, you could use your handy apple cutter. You can put the core in there. Notice again, I'm taking the stem off so it doesn't cause a bitter flavor. All parts of the apple can be made into vinegar, but we're trying to make a very tasty vinegar because we're going to put this into a beverage later. So you can either use apple scraps, where that's the skins and the cores, or you can use the whole apple. It really doesn't matter. If you have any really gross parts, you're obviously going to omit those and cut those out, like a bruise or a rotten spot. You can just cut that part out. You don't want to include that in your ferment because that could house some bacteria that we're not looking for. The recipe is 1 tablespoon of sugar per cup of water used. And here we've used just under 1 cup, so we're using 1 tablespoon of sugar. It could be white, or I prefer pure cane sugar. And we're going to put that into our pint jar, and then we're going to leave that for 2 weeks. Here I'm adding about a tablespoon of store-bought apple cider vinegar with the mother. That's very important, and that will just provide a little quick start to your fermentation. You're going to shake it really well, and like I said, leave it for about 2 weeks, but you can leave it a little longer if you want. Then you're going to want to take it and you're going to want to strain it. So this is where that empty bottle from the store comes in really handy, because it has a built-in strainer. What we're going to do is we're going to, through the magic of video recording, now we just have the apple cider vinegar. All I did was dump everything through a strainer. So now we just have the vinegar. The apple parts have been removed, and we're going to decant it into our store-bought recycled now bottle. I'm showing you as I pour this into a white pot just so you can kind of see what it looks like and what the color should be. What I'm showing you here is called the mother. If you're familiar with kombucha making, it looks a lot like a SCOBY, and that's actually a really good thing to have. So as you see, after I pour in my prepared vinegar into my bottle, I'm just going to add just a little tiny piece of that mother, and then you can save that other mother to start your next batch of apple cider vinegar. And now all we got to do is just put a label on it, and we'll know that that is our homemade apple cider vinegar. Always make sure you put the date on it as well. So now what are we going to make out of apple cider vinegar? Well, that is switchel. And switchel is basically the energy drink of the 1800s. This was very popular with farmers. It's also likened to our modern day Gatorade. It provides a lot of essential nutrients and minerals, and just helps to rehydrate and revitalize people after they have had a long day of work. So we're going to need, this is a 48-ounce recycled bottle that I'm going to be making this in. The recipe calls for a half gallon, but really I just made it in the 48. We're going to make sure that we have our vinegar, some filtered or spring water, some molasses that is not blackstrap molasses, and either fresh or powdered ginger. Typically, historically, settlers would have had more access to powdered ginger than they would fresh ginger, but it's really up to you what you choose. The recipe for a half gallon is a 1/4 cup of raw apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon of ground ginger, and a 1/2 cup of molasses. But what I did here is I did a 1/4 cup of molasses and also a 1/4 cup of maple syrup. And in hindsight, it could use a little more maple syrup, I think, after I have taste tested it. So if you want to be a little generous with the maple syrup, what I'm using is actual maple syrup from Vermont or Maine, but it's the good stuff. And you're just going to leave that for about 2 days on the shelf, and then you can refrigerate it. Typically, this was kept in like a cold spring or tied to a rope and hung in the creeks, which was their way of keeping it nice and chilled and cold. Here we're going to make a beverage with it, and really all this is just plain the switchel after it has been fermented, just poured over ice and then garnished with some fun stuff. I decided to add a lemon because that seemed right. And then I also have a sprig of fresh lemon balm from my garden. I thought it just added a little something fun to it. So there is the basic recipe. There really is no measurements for that. It was just served over ice. Next, we're going to move on to ginger bugs. What is a ginger bug? Well, essentially a ginger bug is when you take ginger and water and sugar and mix it together and sit it on the counter, and eventually it colonizes the yeast and bacteria on the ginger. And that creates a really nice fermentable starter that can be used to create all kinds of different sodas out of basically anything that is a sugary liquid. I prefer, again, to use the cane sugar in this situation, but you can use whatever you feel comfortable with. Here, I'm going to show you how you feed it. So basically, you're going to start with nothing, just an empty jar and some ginger and some water and some sugar. And after about 5 days of feeding this, you're going to have the material that you will use to create your ginger sodas. The recipe for that is as follows. 2 heaping tablespoons of grated ginger, although I prefer to chop it because that's too much work. A tablespoon of white sugar and 2 tablespoons of filtered water. And each day you're going to add that. This is what it will look like, or should look like, after 4 days. So at this point you would feed it one more time, and then the next day it should be ready to be used in soda. The bubbles are the indicator. My favorite thing to make with a ginger bug is ginger ale. So you're going to start with 2 cups of filtered water in a saucepan, and you're going to take a nice hefty chunk of ginger. Now, when you make your ginger bug, many people agree that using organic ginger for making the ginger bug is crucial, and I tend to agree with that. But when you go to make the ginger ale, I think that you could use any kind of ginger. I know how hard it is for some people, especially in rural communities where I live, to get organic produce. It's not always so easy. So if you can, and it also is extra expensive. So if you can splurge for the organic just to be used in the ginger bug, then you could buy the conventional ginger or learn how to grow it on your own. But I'll admit that I've had a hard time doing that. So here we have the following things. We have a decent sized chunk of ginger, a lemon, and a lime. We're going to use half of each of that, and I'm just squeezing it in there. Just the juice. That's all we want. And then, as you notice, this is a little trick that I put it in both ways because you get a little bit more juice out of it. If you don't have a squeezer, obviously you can do it by hand, but I have a lot of nifty tools, so I try to use them when I can to just cut some time off of things. But you're going to then add about a teaspoon of molasses, which just gives it a little extra zing. And then you're going to add half cup of sugar. So basically what we have is 2 cups of filtered water, 1 teaspoon of molasses, a half a cup of sugar, and a half a cup of chopped ginger. And we're going to simmer that for about 10 minutes. And then we're going to strain that, and we're going to add filtered water to this, enough to make 1 quart of sweetened liquid. So this is me straining it, and notice I'm not going to throw this away because this ginger can be used again to make another item. So don't discard this, or just save it to be used later. And then I'm going to add to this 1 quart of sweetened liquid some of my ginger bugs. So for each quart of sweetened liquid, you want to add 1/4 of a cup of your ginger bug. And obviously you're going to strain that. So you can either pour it into your 1/4 of a cup and then run it through the strainer, or strain it directly into the 1/4 of a cup. In this situation, that's what I choose to do, is strain it directly into the 1/4 of a cup. Whatever works for you is good, but you definitely want to strain it. And you just add that to your bottle. Now this is a little over a quart, I think the flip tops are. And these flip tops are really only to be used with people who really have a decent amount of experience with ferments, and you'll see later in the video why it'll be very clear. But I like these because you can really build up some pressure in them, and they make really nice fizzy drinks. This is us making a mocktail that is mimicking a mule. So essentially we're going to take our copper vessel, we're going to fill it with ice, we're going to add sweetened Rose's lime juice. You can use regular lime juice, I just prefer the sweetened lime juice. And then we're just going to add a little lime garnish and fill it up with our homemade ginger ale. And I must say, this is probably my favorite concoction of all of these, all 5 of them. Like, this was the one that I like the most, but I'm a little partial because I love ginger. And let's take a look at what this is. There it is. There is your mocktail mule, and essentially all you need to make it. Next up is a pomegranate soda. So basically this is me showing you how you can buy a store-bought liquid, and so you wouldn't have to prepare anything in advance, and all you would need is your store-bought liquid and your 1/4 cup of your prepared ginger bug, and you can make any flavor soda with any kind of juice that you can find. For me, I chose pomegranate juice. It's organic. That's not necessary. I've made it with non-organic things. But basically, again, I'm using this flip top, which is just a little bit over a quart, and I'm adding a 1/4 cup. This is the technique where I'm pouring it into the cup and then straining it into the bottle. You want to make sure that when you put your starter liquid in this bottle, that you allow enough room to add that 1/4 cup, okay? And then you can just top it off. My rule when I do this is that I leave the neck space. So you always want to leave a little bit of space if you're making carbonated ferments, because that just it decreases the amount of explosion. Again, make sure you label and date it. Every time you make a ferment, date the day that you made it. That way you will know when it's time to put it away, because the fermentation process is over. So you want to just keep track of things. You think you're going to remember, but you won't, because you'll get so obsessed with these things, they'll just keep coming. So here is the important lesson to be learned. When you are opening ferments, first of all, I should not have shook it like this. And second of all, you want to put a pan in it or sit it in the sink, because I'm about to spray my entire kitchen with this soda. Yep, that's why we do what we do here. So I suggest you either open it over the sink, treat it like champagne. It will, sometimes they make a mess. Not every time, but sometimes they do. So this one I let sit out and ferment for a very long time. And so I think that's why it behaved this way. Now we're just going to fill our glass, and we're going to pour our pomegranate soda into our glass. Look how beautiful that fizz is. That's actually really fun. I know it seems daunting when you see it explode like that, but it's just so tasty. All these ferments should have a little bit of fizz to them, but not all of them actually ended up with enough fizz. I think some of them could have been fermented a little longer. I'm just going to garnish this with a sprig of ginger mint and a slice of lemon. And then I also, after I had a little taste of it, decided I wanted to add a little something extra. So I came back in with this new find, this Rose's peach syrup, and I thought that just gave it a little extra something fun. But feel free to experiment with your own selections. Just follow the rule of a 1/4 cup to a quart of sweetened liquid, and you can make anything into a soda. Next up, we're going to talk about milk kefir. You can say kefir, you can say kefir. I'm going to say kefir. That's what I'm used to saying. Basically, what milk kefir is a fermented milk product. And the milk kefir itself, you can make a lot of interesting things with. But what we're going to focus on in this video is making the milk kefir and then separating the milky part from the whey. Basically, the curds and whey, like Miss Muffet. So here I have a jar. It's about a quart of milk that has been fermented using the milk kefir grains. And what you're seeing is this cottage cheese-like substance that's not going through the strainer here. And that is the grains. That's what you need. This is essentially your starter. Like we used a mother for our apple cider vinegar earlier. This is the starter, or the ginger bug. We all had starters for these things. Your milk kefir grains are what ferments. They are full of yeast and bacteria, and that's what causes this ferment. So you're going to save that, put it back into your jar, and that's what will make your next batch of kefir. So this is our finished kefir. You can drink this as is. You can use it to make smoothies and all kinds of fun stuff. But what we're going to do is use the whey. So we're going to take our grains, fill it with whole milk, and that will begin. That's basically how you feed it, like the ginger bug. And then that will make our next batch of kefir. And we set that aside. It takes about 24 hours for this to work once you get your grains moving along pretty well. And then we're going to come back to our finished milk kefir, and I'm going to show you how we strain the curds from the whey. What is whey? Well, there's two kinds of whey. There's whey that comes from milk kefir, and then there's whey that comes from cheese making as well. But basically, it is a protein that separates whenever you make something with lactose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a funnel and a coffee filter, okay? And I have another jar underneath it, and we're going to pour the milk kefir through this, and then we're going to make a little setup that we will then put into the refrigerator overnight. And when we come back, you will have a very thick, milky substance on the top, which is more like yogurt or a thin cream cheese, which you can make all kinds of fun dips and interesting stuff with. Again, we will have another video. If you're interested in that, let us know. So here we're going back to that ginger that we used for the ginger ale, and we're going to create a ginger lemonade. And this is going to be a little more subtle in the ginger department because it is the second round of decocting the ginger into a tea. And when I say decocting, that's just basically an infusing technique that is where you boil a root in water. So what I've done is basically created a little less strong, okay, a weaker version of ginger tea. And that 2 cups of water I have added to a jar, and then I've added, I think it was a 1/4 cup of lemon juice to that. You could use fresh lemons, but I'm just kind of cheating a little bit here because all I want is the essence of these flavors, right? So now we have ginger tea and we have added the lemon. And now we can take that and make something out of that. So now we have ginger lemonade. Make sure when you add things, you record that. Yes, it was a 1/4 cup of lemon. So then we'll take, this is our finished whey. See how it kind of looks like lemonade by itself, but that's what color it should be, and it should not be milky. The separation should make it so that it's fairly clear. And then we're going to get, this jar is, it's a bottle. This is a kombucha bottle, and that is, I think, a 16-ounce bottle. So we're going to make a small batch here. So my basic recipe for a 16-ounce bottle would be 1/3 cup of sugar we would add to this, and then we would add about 3 tablespoons of our finished whey product. Again, I like to use the pure cane sugar. And then I'm going to add the tea. If you end up with not enough tea, you can always add a little more water. And right here, I'm actually adding the whey, and then this is the tea. So I didn't have to add any additional water because I had enough tea. Again, we're going to want to leave just a little bit of room in the bottle. Since these are made for kombucha, they are good for carbonated beverages. And we're going to just give that a nice little shake. Do not forget to label. I can't stress that enough. Always remember the date that you make it. Every one of these ferments have a little bit more time. So when you're talking about kefir products, you're going to want, that can range from 2 to 6 days of fermenting. And to be honest, these I did not leave long enough, so they did not have enough bubbles. I left mine for 3 days, and I think they could have used 4 or 5, to be honest. So after you've fermented on the counter for a few days, you can either put them in the refrigerator to store for when you're ready. And then you can make yourself a nice beverage. Here I am just pouring a little bit over some crushed ice into a cocktail glass, garnishing it with a slice of a lemon, and just for a little pop of color, I decided to add some fresh raspberries on a long toothpick. And it's amazing how just the most subtle things can make it extra special. And if you prefer it to be a little more fizzy, you can always add a little splash of sparkling water. The next thing we're going to make is a lavender soda. And here is a little piece of a video from me making lavender syrup. But again, after I made the syrup, I reserved the botanicals, which was lavender and butterfly pea. And I made a second brewing of it and then used that to make my lavender soda. The recipe for this is 1/2 cup of herbs, 2 cups of water, 1/2 cup of sugar, and 1/2 cup of lemon juice. And that's what I have in this bottle that is purple. Again, I'm using a swing top bottle. And then I'm going to take that, about 1/4 of it, and we're going to put some kefir whey in it and turn that into a lavender soda. Now for a quart of soda, earlier when we made 16 ounces, it was about 3 tablespoons. I like to use about 1/4 cup for a quart. And I'm just adding that to the already prepared lemonade. This turned out really, really special. And what you see me adding here, I actually poured out some from the quart bottle just to make sure I had enough room for my whey. And then you can just add back enough until you have it about to the bottom of the neck. I like to leave the neck, like I said before. And you just give it a nice little shake. And again, you're going to leave it sit out on the counter at room temperature, about 70, 75 degrees for 2 to 6 days. Again, just in case, it's always good to have a pan underneath. This one did not get bubbly enough to explode, thank goodness, but it's always good to be safe. You're going to crack it open when you're ready to make your delicious beverages. And then I just put this in the cutest cup I could find. Just a little bit of crushed ice. And then I just poured it over top. Now again, I kind of wanted to have this a little bit more fizzy. So I highly recommend a little splash of some sparkling water. This is Perrier, that's all I could really find, but it just gives it a little extra fizz and a little more fun. And of course, we don't want to forget our garnishes. I decided that a lime looked pretty, a little pop of greenery. You could even rim this glass, which would make it kind of fun with some sugar. And this is a grape hyacinth, which some people might not know is actually edible, which is why we're not going to eat it, but we're going to garnish with it. I think this turned out to be the prettiest drink of them all. And I'm kind of proud of this one, to be honest. Here is a quick glance at all the interesting mocktails that we were able to make. And they are all full of probiotic gut health. And they're great for anyone who's trying to have a tasty beverage, but without the alcohol. We hope this has piqued your interest in fermentations. If you're interested in more information about our garden, please look us up on social media. Our links are in our information on YouTube. Thank you.